U.S. Treasury confirms that we can remove illicit activity from the Bitcoin FUD dice, with the U.S. Treasury recently indicating that Bitcoin and altcoins aren't used for significant illicit activity. It's time to change the narrative. I'm going to run through this relatively quickly so that we can discuss it. The Treasury Department published 3 reports that identified key concerns from money laundering, I can't say that word on YouTube, financing, and weapons proliferation financing. I think I can say that on YouTube. We'll find out if we get demonetized. Here's what each said about the use of cryptocurrencies. In the assessment about money laundering, it says the use of virtual assets, i.e. cryptocurrencies, for money laundering remains far below that of fiat currency and more traditional methods. By the way, normally when you're trying to figure out what is truth and what is not, you go to the biased source and see if they say something that goes against what they believe. When I study the birth and death of Christ, I go and I look at scholars that did not like the Christians and then see what they say, and they still say that he died on the cross. When you go to a biased source, that their bias would lead them to say the opposite, and they actually say the thing that is true. That's very important. The U.S. Treasury Department, more than anyone, would be biased in saying that the use of virtual assets are used for money laundering. They would say that they are more used in money laundering than fiat currencies, but instead they tell the truth and they say the use of virtual assets for money laundering remains far below that of fiat currency and more traditional methods. Their bias is to say that cryptocurrencies are used for money laundering because that gives them more power, but they didn't say that. They said they're a biased source. They said that the use of virtual assets for money laundering remains far below that of fiat currency and more traditional methods. By the way, I'm going to read this line down here right below this after every single one of these quotes. Case closed. Staff of the U.S. Treasury, the authors of the report, are the most knowledgeable and best equipped investigators, and I would say they're biased in the other direction, and enforcers against illicit financing in the world. Moreover, the reports are reviewed by other U.S. government partners, including the DOJ, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI. There could not be a more authoritative source to convey these findings. Let's continue. I can't say that word on YouTube. Use of virtual assets appear to remain limited when compared to other financial products and services. The 2022 National, I can't say that on YouTube, Financing Risk Assessment, it says so on page 23. Let me reiterate, there could not be a more authoritative source to convey these findings. Last but not least, there is no evidence that a proliferation network has used a virtual asset to procure a specific proliferation-sensitive good or technology. This is talking about other types of cybercrime. Not going to get into too much of what this means, just lumping in with illicit activity. This is from the 2022 National Proliferation Financing Risk Assessment. This has to do with weapons proliferation. Remember, there could not be a more authoritative source to convey these findings, and these reports were reviewed by the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI, all of which are U.S. government institutions and agencies which have a bias in favor of knocking on cryptocurrencies because they want the U.S. dollar to remain supreme. But they still say, truthfully, that Bitcoin is not being used widely in illicit activity. Kelly, can we trust the Department of Justice? Can we trust the Department of Homeland Security? Can we trust the FBI and the U.S. Treasury when they say that Bitcoin is not being predominantly used in illicit activity?
Well, here's what we can trust unquestionably, is that Bitcoin is the pinnacle of innovation probably in the last, I don't even know. Definitely this century. It's going to change the course of humanity because of the monetary instrument and that it is. And the fact that it is transparent, the blockchain, every action happens on the blockchain. That's what we can trust. And I did a tweet yesterday after watching this clip that made me just so sad with Senator Elizabeth Warren, interviewing Jonathan Levine from Chain Analysis. And basically, she's trying to get him to say an answer that pushes her narrative, which is that these Russian oligarchs can skirt sanctions by, divesting their money into multiple different wallets that don't use KYC and then using some sort of mixer. And he answers every single time. And the second she realizes that it's not necessarily possible, especially if somebody has $1 billion to go and money launder across the, multiple blockchains, because it's all listed in the ledger on every blockchain, and all this stuff is trackable. And that being said, they've also only have around, I think he said somewhere around $20 to $30 million each day that's used within different mixers and stuff like that. So if somebody was divesting $1 billion in cash, there's not enough liquidity to be able to do it. I mean, think about the story we just had. What was it? About a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, with the couple that had all the money from the $3.6 billion hack. And they were able to track that. And they ended up finding it all the way through to even, like, I think, Walmart gift cards, but also through the blockchain, seeing where all these tangle web of transactions happen. So can we trust the Department of Homeland Security and Secret Service and the Treasury? Yes, because they finally have looked at the data versus looked at the fear of ignorance, essentially, is what we've been battling.
And by the way, I'm not saying, I want to be clear on this, I'm not saying that I trust the U.S. Treasury. I'm not saying I trust the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of Justice or the FBI. However, I am trusting them to act in their own interest. And in their own interest, they would say that Bitcoin is used for illicit activity because that gives them the authority to go and be more policing on it and more authoritarian on it. The reason that I trust their stance on this is because it goes directly against their motives. Their motive would be to say that Bitcoin is used for illicit activity so they can crack down on it and be more authoritarian. Government grows. That's just a fact of nature. Tell me one time that you have ever seen a government start doing something and stop. You know, the federal income tax was supposed to be a temporary measure to fund the Civil War, and it's now 40% for the highest marginal tax bracket, 39.6%, whatever it is for this year. The government does not implement something and then shrink it. Government grows. That's a simple fact of nature. You know, you got death, you got taxes, you got the sun's going to rise tomorrow, and you got the government's going to grow. Those are facts of nature right there. The government is going to grow, and they want to have more influence. So the reason that I trust their opinion on this is because I trust them to act in their own interest, and then their own interest is the opposite. So I just want to be clear on that. It's not that I intrinsically trust these institutions, because to be honest with you, I don't really. That being said, I do also want to make sure you also understand why this is so important. The reason this is so important is because this absolutely, once and for all, categorically refutes one of the biggest arguments that people use against Bitcoin. And they say, oh, well, it's just used for weapons. It's just used for laundering. It's just using for other activity that I can't talk about on YouTube. Who else has the authority to say this other than the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Treasury, the Department of Justice, and the FBI? If they said it, what more do you need to know that Bitcoin is not actually being used for those purposes? This is case closed, shut down. If anybody ever again says that Bitcoin is being predominantly used for that, link them this article, bitcoinmagazine.com/culture/US-treasury-bitcoin-not-illicit. It's a simple fact, case closed, it's done. The reason we're talking about this is because we're talking about long-term fundamentals that lead to the increase in the price of Bitcoin. How many people are now going to read this article and they're going to say, oh, wait a minute, okay, I thought that Bitcoin's being used for illicit activity. It's really not. I guess I'll invest in it. Maybe not many, but the point is this is going to start to help the zeitgeist understand that Bitcoin is not this evil, spooky, boogeyman currency. It is actually a very good thing. It's not a moral thing, but it is a tool that we can use for good for humanity. This is a major fundamental development. This is not small. This is huge. And despite the price action being boring, this is a huge deal that is going to help price action in the long term, because remember what I said earlier. Number one, price can go down 90% and Bitcoin can recover. Why? Because two, the fundamentals are upstream of the technicals. The technicals and the price action did not respond to this news. Within the next 5 years, I guarantee you this will have an impact on the price action. But you got to zoom out. You have to make sure you're not just looking at the price action chart, because you will be like a horse with blinders on, and you won't notice that something's coming this way and it's going to hit you and blindside you. If you look at the entire perspective, you're going to have a much better chance of running the race to fruition. And when we understand that the fundamentals are upstream of the price action, then the technical analysis can be done in its proper context, which is with a backing of fundamental understanding of the market.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, you should definitely consider subscribing, because we're trying to help you become financially free in these cryptocurrency markets. And also consider following us on Twitter @CryptoJeb for more updates on the price of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Peace.